Hi there, it's Jonathan here. This is 4100 and we're studying the history of Israel's kings. Lots to cover in chapter 17 today. This is the end of the line for the northern kingdom. While Ahaz was doing evil in the south, in Judah the last king of Israel was appointed. His name was Hoshea. To be a vassal was to be the subject of a stronger nation. It was a standard covenant treaty form used in the ancient Near East. Israel was meant to be in a covenant treaty with God. Now things have digressed to the point where Israel is the subject or vassal of Assyria. But Hoshea doesn't keep his word in this, and with an eerie touch of irony, he goes back to Egypt just one more time. Some of us will remember Keith Green's classic song, So You Wanna Go Back to Egypt, taken from the ridiculous request made by the people to Moses when they asked to go back to Egypt, where they could be enslaved again rather than walk into God's promised land. Israel goes back to Egypt 17:4, which infuriates their covenant boss Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, who promptly comes and takes them all off into slavery to Assyria. 17:6 gives us the haunting final words. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and deported Israel to Assyria. 17:7 is a lengthy description of why this all happened. The recurring refrain, the Lord their God who had brought them up out of Egypt, is very important for the Jewish people. The Exodus rescue is known as the controlling narrative, overarching everything the Jews believe. Yahweh is the God who rescued them by the blood of the Lamb and through the Red Sea. The point being made here is that this has not stopped God's people idolatrously worshipping other gods. 17:9, they secretly did things that were not right, a powerful way to articulate sinning no matter what age you come from. Verse 13 reminds us that God's modus operandi has always been to speak. In the period of the kings, this was most often through the prophet. God had given them a law to live by through Moses, and when this was forgotten, as it frequently was, he sent fresh revelation through the prophetic voice. 17:14 is a timeless truth explaining judgment, but they would not listen and were stiff-necked. Verse 15, they followed worthless idols, and they themselves became worthless. That's a pretty impacting statement to find in the Bible, isn't it? They became worthless. I think this speaks towards the truth that Paul unpacks in Romans 1, where he refers to sin causing futility in the mind of a human being. The image of God, humanity, through sin can become futile and far less than its original worth due to being given over to images made by mortal man. Verse 16 says they forsook all the commands and bowed down to the starry hosts. They worshipped the creation over the creator of creation, who had promised himself in covenant faithfulness to be their God. Through 17:18 and following, take note of how often the presence of God is referred to. From the very beginning, humanity was designed to be with God, to enjoy his presence. Due to Israel's sin, verse 20, God has had to thrust them from his presence. We are reminded of Jeroboam's sin, which caused so much harm to the relationship. He thought it wise to establish a new temple worship in both Dan and Bethel, apart from the temple in Jerusalem, and installed his own unsanctioned priests. Verse 23, so the people of Israel were taken into exile to Assyria. Verse 24, the king of Assyria tries to resettle his recently appropriated cities and farmland formerly belonging to Israel, but the new people are cursed by the Lord with attacking lions. So they send Israelite priests back to set up some syncretized worship of Yahweh, mixed in with all the other religions. Verse 33 says they worshipped the Lord, but they also served their own gods. This is the beginning of the people of Samaria, the Samaritans, a hybrid religious nation who were never accepted by the Israelites and whose disdain for one another existed well into the 1st century AD in the life of Jesus. Remember the famous woman at the well in Samaria, or the Good Samaritan in Jesus' story. Chapter 17 ends with the ominous words that to this day their children and grandchildren continue to do as their ancestors did in worshipping other gods, sins passed on from generation to generation. This is one of the heavy chapters of our reading challenge. Not many to go now. Enjoy God's Word.